that will enable users to see all the rewards in one place, claim them, but also have a central place where everyone can look at the reward calculations. Why are we doing 2 weeks? The idea is to be able to iterate very quickly. You will see that's a running thing in this program. We really want to adapt as we go. By the way, the 320 million, 25 million tokens will not be streamed at an equal rate. So at the start of the program, we might start a bit slower with less tokens, and as we go, we're going to ramp up and double down on what's working and maybe stop what's not working. Performance-wise, OpenBlock will monitor the KPIs. So this includes the supply side and demand side metrics, and oversight. The token assembly will be able to cancel the program at any time if it's not successful and if the metrics are not reached. And that's it. I hope that was fast enough.
Thank you, Baptiste. Just a reminder, this Ignite program is the first token program that has been proposed for the ZK Sync governance system, with a focus, as Baptiste has mentioned, on creating some distributions to support the creation of a liquidity hub. With that, I'll pass it over to Karthik, who can maybe talk to us about the importance of the ERA as a liquidity hub for the ZK Elastic Chain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, hello everybody. I'm Karthik. I work at Matter Labs on the ZK Sync team. To answer Rafa's question, we know like the end goal for the Elastic Chain is to attract the best builders trying to build on crypto rails in the industry. And we know that for builders that want to build meaningful apps, especially at scale, there needs to be sufficient liquidity and like really like banking infrastructure for them to go enable this, for people to exchange value, borrow, and all these kind of core functions that we know exist on chain. And the beauty of the kind of native interop that's enabled through ZK proofs on the ZK Sync protocol is that builders, no matter where they build on the chain, can access the liquidity from other places. They don't have to bootstrap their liquidity, and DeFi protocols, which we know is very time and capital intensive to do so. So the way this program is designed is that ZK Sync ERA, which is a ZK rollup secured by Ethereum. It's been live since I believe March or April of 2023, so about a year and a half ago. Is slated to be the liquidity hub for the Elastic Chain. And what this means is that this ZK Sync ERA already has a lot of core DeFi infrastructure that exists already. Native USDC, Aave, Bidall from Securitize will be on chain. Some Perps platforms and other kind of core assets. And the idea is that this program will enable a vibrant kind of DeFi ecosystem on ERA that any builder, whether they're on ERA or any other ZK chain, can easily tap into to get liquidity. So the idea is that we're kind of doing this one time for the ecosystem versus every chain having to kind of think about doing this and spending time and money to kind of do so. And beyond like the maturity and kind of security of ZK Sync ERA, as well as the DeFi primitives, it is it's backed by the ZK Sync protocol, and we're reaching towards like stage 1 fully on-chain governance with this. So it is what we believe is like the best place for this liquidity hub to exist on the Elastic Chain.
So Karthik, I think related, we can jump into questions here with a related question to a liquidity hub. And I think both Daljeet and yourself may have a comment on this. This question is from Alex Keating, one of the delegates. Why was 325 million tokens chosen as the budget? Why wouldn't half the budget or double the budget achieve the program goals? Alex, any additional context that you would like to add to the question?
No additional context. That was a great summary, Rafa.
I can take a first swing at this, and then Daljeet or Baptiste, feel free to jump in. So first of all, Alex, thanks for the question. It's a good question. This is the way that the program was designed, and the way that it was thought through is we suspect, just looking across industry comps and the kind of the ambitions of the Elastic Chain, we have some very big heavy hitters that are going to be launching chains in the coming weeks, including Treasure, including Abstract, which is the Pudgy Penguin kind of a consumer play, and a few core others. Like the ambitions of Elastic Chain are very large, and we look at other industry comparables. To kind of match the liquidity that we know we'll need, we roughly need about 500 mil to $1 billion of DeFi TVL. Like that's kind of where we want to back into for Elastic Chain liquidity. And so basically with that as kind of the working kind of paradigm, what we try to do is two things. One is like we know with these programs, like especially if you look at some of the previous ones, like we know we need to, like we can't take a small swing. This is something that you need to take a big swing because in order to meet this number, but then also just to build momentum and narrative around it. A small swing in the industry, like it might be difficult for people to get excited about this program. And part of the goal of this program is to bring new energy, new liquidity, new users into the ecosystem. And then from a specific number perspective, we've studied previous programs of all shapes and sizes closely with Delegates, with his team, and kind of like as well as with Merkl. And these programs typically range in terms of ROI. So basically ROI is number of DeFi, like for every dollar spent in incentives, how much DeFi TVL can you roughly expect? And we've seen the range anywhere from $3 to $4 on the low end, roughly, to even upwards of like 13 or 14. Of course, these have there's a lot of inputs into this, right? There's like macro conditions, there's a quality of apps, there's a bunch of different inputs that are not always controllable by us. But looking at the spectrum of kind of what potentially is the bull and bear case, and then also looking at our current DeFi TVL, which is right around 90 million in USD on ERA. This is how we backed into roughly believing that we wanted to do 300 million ZK tokens, which I think at today's prices is around 45 or so million USD. So this is how we backed into this number. Also 300 is like, a nice shiny round number. So I think that felt like the right size program for us to build momentum, capture attention, but also kind of back into our goals. The last thing I'll say, I think in your question about why not half the budget or double the budget, this program, to Baptiste's point, is set up in a way where we're doing a lot of kind of iteration and learning like as we go. So it's not something where we're fully committed, like we're going to spend all this money for 9 months, like for sure. What we want to do is give the committee a lot of opt-ins and opt-outs with a high degree of accountability, right? So we wanted to right-size this program so it's set up for success. That in a good scenario, the team has everything it needs to execute well, maintain momentum, not take pauses to like do another proposal and governance vote, but then have the accountability such that if the program is not running successfully, we can potentially modify or even as needed, terminate the program at kind of any given point in time. So we tried to bring these two kind of competing concerns of momentum and accountability together. So that's kind of the way that the program is structured. I don't know if anyone else wants to add.
Yeah, Alex, do you have? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joji.
Just add one or two statements here. I think, there's a lot of checks and balances. There's ways to exit out of the program if it's not working. And, a lot of this is like what Karthik was saying, it was a cost of capital models we built for Karthik and for this program to get to these numbers. But the other thing I would add is that a lot of this spend would happen at the latter part of this program, because that's where most of the capital is on the chain, and the cost of capital is higher, just given that. So we have plenty of opportunity in the early innings to understand what we're doing, experiment, and if it's not working, there's ways to exit out or reduce the scope of this. So I wouldn't look at like 300 million and say, wow, this is all ready to go and we already have our strategy set out. It's like we have 2-week increments. We can exit the program at any time, and at the most of this majority of this capital will come in at the end. So in the early innings, like very little of it will be used. Hopefully that makes sense.
Great. And I think so just to paraphrase, the proposal team has looked at other programs, is looking at the ratio of effectiveness of capital to drive TVL, and has done an analysis on the TVL necessary to be able to really activate and provide enough depth and breadth of liquidity in the ZK ecosystem. Furthermore, you're mentioning the importance of understanding which experiments work and then deploying continuous capital on the experiments which do work, to really have, like, swing hard. Now, related to the program allocation, this talks basically about the 300 million ZK tokens for incentives. The second part of the token allocation was a 25 million ZK, not $25 million, but 25 million ZK, allocated to program management, which, as Gabriel has mentioned, is more than 7% of the program's cost. Could you break down how that 25 million ZK operational cost was accounted for, how it relates to other programs, and why? And see if we can provide some additional context there. Gabriel, any additional context that you'd like to provide there?
Hi. No, thank you. That's mainly it.
Great, thank you.
I can go into a little bit of where that cost is used. So there's a bunch of areas. One is analytics and technology infrastructure. So that's going towards OBL, OpenBlock Labs, and Merkl. The main cost there is we're doing this program a lot differently than many programs in the past. It's being very heavily data driven and informed by like basically quants that are thinking really hard about all of these recommendations every 2 weeks. And there's a lot of data infrastructure work required to build out for this. So that's ingestion of user all the way down to user level data for all of these DeFi protocols. And then there is public dashboards, a bunch of analytics. So there's just a heavy amount of data work that we're investing this 25 million into. The other thing is obviously marketing, administration. I would say that this program is run very differently, where it's than many other incentive programs, where it's not just here's a jackpot of dollars and we'll just ship this. This is like we're investing a lot of time into data-driven analytics, and that's where most of that money is going to.
Maybe I can quickly jump in and add, the way that I personally would think about the fees, the 25 million ZK, is to Daljeet's point, it's an investment in doing this program differently than programs of the past and innovating here. And we strongly believe that this will provide the best ROI for token holders, right? We are, like, to Daljeet's point, there is going to be continuous iteration and experimentation. Like, we have full-time quants that are that'll be working as part of OpenBlock Labs looking at this. And the idea is that, and I know we're talk a little bit about retention, but we're gonna be looking very carefully at things like, okay, what's the supply side performance for every experiment we run across different pools, assets, routes, apps? Like, what's the supply side performance like? Are we getting the kind of supply side lift that we anticipate? We should be doing control versus treatment and seeing, like, if we do it for 1 2-week cycle but not the other 2 week, like, what happens? Equally importantly, we're going to be looking at demand side. Great, we've filled up a pool. Are people actually using this to borrow money or to make a swap, or are we just kind of beefing up the DeFi TVL supply side but not really thinking about demand side? How much of this capital can actually be retained post incentives, which is a common challenge in a lot of these incentive programs? And then also equally, and then, like, the last thing I'll add is what kind of users are we acquiring? we're going to be doing user segmentation analysis to be like, are we acquiring kind of more mercenary capital that's just kind of here? They filled up a wallet from Binance, put some money in, but we don't really know who they are. Or are we acquiring users either on the supply and demand side that we know are active DeFi users or liquidity providers in other ecosystems that we believe will have higher and better lifetime value if we acquire them in this ecosystem? So in order to do this correctly, in our view, we need to make an investment to be highly analytics and data driven, and kind of do this in this kind of fashion, which is why some of the fees for vendors are higher than in other programs. The last thing I'll add is the 25 million of ZK is in a cap minter. It will be used on demand. It includes, beyond the vendor fees, it includes things like for marketing budgets, discretionary bonuses, and then like this discretionary use kind of pool is for like other unforeseen circumstances, other things that may come up. It's really meant to give the program, similar, we talked about right sizing the rewards piece. It's meant to give the program the opportunity to be successful in different kind of, like, we kind of try to game out different scenarios, such that we can't afford to lose momentum on this thing. But this is why we have the DeFi Steering Committee as kind of this veto check to make sure that the fund, like any funds being used for administrative costs, are explicitly approved.
And one additional note, so Karthik and Baptiste and Daljeet, are all these administrative funds expected to be used essentially immediately? Or like what is, because similar to the incentives you mentioned earlier, that the incentives are minted and deployed on a 2-week basis. What's the distribution process of the administrative funds? Or if the program is canceled at the end of season 1, does that mean all these administrative funds have also been like used up?
Yeah, it's a great question. So similar to, the exact same format as user rewards. Every 2 weeks, administrative costs will be streamed, and the way that we're doing that is that just from a multi-sig and kind of on-chain signing perspective, like the administrative fees for, let's say, OpenBlock Labs, like the OpenBlock Labs team will submit basically a transaction for the DSC to approve, to say for the 2 weeks, this is the amount of tokens that will be streamed. This way, it's mint on demand streaming, and this protects token holders from undue inflation if the program does get canceled, or even if we don't decide to use, in the case for like, there's likely going to be buffer and other things that are just a bit over allocated. We're trying to make best guesses. If we don't use them, this protects token holders from not needing to mint those tokens.
In a recent post by L2Beat, they mentioned one of the questions, which is cancellation and revoking the cap minters. 2 questions following this token allocation are: what happens to what happens if you meet your goal of 500 million to 1 billion TVL ahead of schedule with, let's say, half the funds of the cap minters? Will those funds be continuously unused? And what happens to those unused funds? And then second part of that question, which is the cancellation program, what does that look like in practice?
I can maybe take the first one. So at the end of every season, so every 3 months, OpenBlock Labs is tasked with proposing whether or not they would like to renew the program based on performance, market conditions, including like token price, DeFi, the current state of DeFi TVL. And so there is a structure in place for, and this must be like, they put a proposal up, a recommendation up, and then the DSC, the DeFi Steering Committee, will need to approve or reject this. So this is a mechanism that we have in place to be a check that in case we hit our goals early, or in the bear case, in case the program is not performing up to expectation, there is a way for the DeFi Steering Committee to kind of veto and say, hey, we don't think renewal is a good idea, or even OpenBlock Labs can say we don't think renewal is a good idea. So there is kind of a check in place. I forgot the other question, sorry, Rafa, that you asked.
In practice, what does cancellation of the program looks like?
In practice, what this looks like is a DeFi Steering Committee. Well, I guess there's two routes, right? There's a token assembly route and then the DeFi Steering Committee route. So on the DeFi Steering Committee route, what this looks like in practice is that the DeFi Steering Committee has decided that it is not moving forward with the program for whatever reason. And as a result, any transactions that are being sent will not be signed by the DeFi Steering Committee. So no funds, no tokens will be minted. And then we'll have a process to basically kind of burn the cap minters at that point.
Great, thank you so much. I hope this answers all the related questions. Just to follow up and make sure we have that. In the next theme, we're going to talk about team structure, accountability, previous performance of similar projects. There's 3 core questions here. One of which is for OBL from L2Beat regarding servicing similar programs, and how is your engagement here going to be different to ensure the success of this program? The second question is related to Matter Labs' involvement in the program and what the relationship between Matter Labs and the proposal structure looks like. And finally, we can talk about the accountability component, which is what systems of accountability currently exist in the program structure for the teams that are participating in the program. So Daljit, maybe you can go first and talk about your personal engagement as OBL in previous programs and differences for this program, and then we can talk about Matter Labs and accountability models.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I think one of the programs that folks are pointing to is Arbitrum STIP and LTIP. So in that program, there seems to be some misconception of our role in that program. Basically, what the situation is that in that program, we were acting solely as a data analytics provider. So we weren't able to make any recommendations of where incentives should go, like full stop. All we could do was look at what teams did and say, this is what the implications and efficacy of these incentives were. That's very different than the role here, the role we've done in other programs. So in this role, we're able to make those recommendations. In fact, this was our original impetus for taking this approach, was looking at all the issues that went wrong with STIP and LTIP and being like, we should never do programs like that. We should not, if we can avoid it, if we can be data driven. And we've done this for other programs as well. So SWE, we worked with them last year. They were around 12 mil TVL. Nobody looked at them in terms of DeFi. And now they're a force in DeFi, actually. They're if you look at their DeFi llama stuff. So it's a very different approach we took with them, and relationship and partnership more akin to this than what we did with Arbitrum STIP. And so I just think that there's a bit of a misconception on the forum of like what our role was in STIP, and hopefully this gives you some clarity into this role is much more prescriptive. That one was, and much more, this is the recommendations, we build the models, we give the recommendations. That one was very different. It was let's monitor what is going on. That was the main thing. Hopefully that adds some clarity.
Great. We'll come back to that and let additional questions bubble up. Karthik, maybe you can talk about Matter Labs and the relationship of Matter Labs to the proposal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what I would say is Matter Labs obviously has a very deep understanding of the DeFi ecosystem on ZK Sync era. That's something that the Matter Labs team launched, like I mentioned, about 18 months ago. So we've been, I think there's 2 ways that Matter Labs has been involved here. One is we've worked very closely with Baptiste and team, as well as Daljit on team, on designing this designing this and providing our inputs there. A lot of the careful thought around rapid experimentation, incentives being back-weighted, the metrics they want to shoot for, we provided some input there, and we're really excited, and we think that this program is like, to Daljeet's point, is different than programs that have done in the past. It almost is a bit of a hybrid model of something like Arbitrum SIP and like a foundation run program, where we're trying to take the best of the learnings from things that have been done before us and really innovate here. One thing we haven't really talked about is on the UX side, which maybe Baptiste can get into a little bit later, but there's a lot of things that we believe this design for a program like this will be the standard for programs moving forward. So that's kind of one way we've contributed, is just providing input into the design. The other is for myself to be one of the members of the DeFi Steering Committee and to continue to provide input and accountability to make sure that the program is well run and operated.
And related to that accountability on the DSC, so the structure of the program has OBL providing direct input into the decisions via analytic ongoing experimentation. Baptiste and the Merkl team serving as a unified user interface to facilitate user participation. And then the DSC, which includes both veterans such as Lindsay from Hedgie, ERA experts such as Karthik, and additional folks with DeFi expertise. One question, Karthik, regarding the DSC accountability is, do you have the right to discontinue the program at any time? How would you describe the direct powers of the DSC within this program?
Yeah, it's a great question. And before I answer that, I think the DSC in this proposal was carefully kind of constructed, where we wanted to include people that are industry experts, but also people that care very deeply about sustainability and like DeFi growth. So someone like Ashwath from Delphi Digital, or Kerman, who's actually written quite extensively on Arbitrum STIP and some of the maybe ways they could have done better. Like, these are folks that are very passionate about this space and they're thought leaders, and we wanted to kind of have a kind of a team of folks that have very strong opinions here. To answer your question, the DeFi Steering Committee, I would think of as almost like I know it's going to sound like a very U.S.-centric answer, but it's kind of role as more as the executive branch of the president and like the U.S. government analogy. The DeFi Steering Committee will have the ability to largely just approve and veto recommendations, both on applicants for the program, the biweekly or fortnightly allocations, and then the renewal recommendations. The DeFi Steering Committee, purely from a cancellation perspective, the way it's designed today, will only have the ability to reject a renewal, like a renewal of a season. They will not have the authority to stop the program at any time. Now, that being said, the token assembly will have the ability to cancel the program at any time. And there's two ways they can kind of do that. But the primary way is they can pass a proposal on the forum to kind of go cancel this program if it's not meeting primary metrics, or we don't think the market conditions are correct from a community perspective, and revoke the DeFi Steering Committee admin authority on the cap minters. And as a result, at that point in time, there won't be the ability for the DeFi Steering Committee to continue signing transactions. Great.
Excellent. One note from the governance infrastructure component of TPPs in general, this is not just related to the Ignite program, but the way that the governance is architected is that the governance process for a token program allocates it grants a minter role to the cap minters. How this works is there's not a transfer of tokens to a specific pool. There's a permission that is granted to the cap minter to mint. Minting should be on demand. What this means is that if the token assembly chooses to cancel the program, you are revoking the minter rights of the cap minters, so as preventing future minting from occurring. We are entrusting all of the token programs, not just the Ignite, to mint the tokens on demand and as necessary. And that will be closely monitored by the governance team to make sure that that's actually the case. I'm going to switch. We've talked a little bit about the team component. Baptiste, could you give a quick overview of the unified interface and how that is different from previous programs? And through that, we can bridge this conversation into how the rewards work. So what does a 2-week distribution look like? What are the specific pairs and assets that we're currently looking at? And how much independence will protocols have to influence the incentives during participating?
Yes. So just to come back, and it's going to be linked also to the fees, but the main goal of the program is what we're trying to show, at least Merkl with the rest of the team, is that, like, you know, some programs have been just trying to throw money, like throw incentives and say, okay, it's going to work. What we're actually trying to do is use part of this budget to allocate to making the right choices in choosing the assets, and also improving UX, creating a very good experience for users to boost this efficiency. Right now, if you look at the total, like what we're taking in fees, if you boost the efficiency of the program with all of this work by like 5%, which is not even huge, you're already you're covering double the spend on these things. So really our main goal, and it's with, you know, OpenBlock's works, our work at Merkl, all the experiment, everything we're doing, the goal is really to boost this efficiency. Just like as an example, we did it at a very low scale for the Optimism Superfest, and like the first week we achieved $146 of TVA for every dollar spent. Of course, it lowered during the program and ended around 50, but it was still very good performance without much effort put in. And I think we can do like a very, very cool thing. Like with this program, we can actually achieve great results. So yeah, so the UX, in short, the goal is to make the program super accessible, so that any user, even someone who's not a DeFi expert, can understand what's going on, can understand also the risks they're taking when they're providing liquidity. Right now, like, you know, if you see like a concentrated liquidity pool with a high APR, you may be like, oh, okay, I'm going to make like 110% APR in this pool, but you're actually using two really volatile tokens, so you don't really know what you're doing. Like, the goal with this is create a simple interface where people can provide liquidity directly, where they know the risk. Like on concentrated liquidity pools, we'll put, okay, impermanent loss, watch out, know what you're doing. But if it's, you know, lending USDC, we're going to be like, okay, go for it. It should be safe. And the whole goal of this is to create a single interface where people can very easily see the opportunities, provide liquidity, and see their rewards. I saw that there was a question in the chat also about the rewards every 2 weeks. So Merkl, the way it works is we run calculations every 8 hours. We're actually working on increasing this cadence. Our goal is to reach like calculations every hour. And so, yeah, we run for now every 8 hours. So every 8 hours, we'll be able to update users on what rewards they got. And then what we have to agree on with the community is how often do we make these rewards available? Right now, Merkl, we can make rewards available as every 8 hours if needed. But what we've decided for the program so far is to slow this cadence down to once every week. So every week, every 8 hours, you see how much rewards you've gotten, like pending rewards. And once a week, these pending rewards become active and you can claim them. But we're super happy to iterate on this.
Great. I'd just like to call out that, you know, from a governance team perspective, accessibility has always been a critical component. So it's good to see that this precedent is being set for other token programs, where it's not just about, you know, if a mechanic exists, but it's also how do we create the pathway for the entire ecosystem and community to participate and be aware that the mechanic is available. Now, one of the things that was raised is, as we think about the token allocation process, Christoph mentioned correctly, how can we have, what are the expectations that the token assembly and delegate community should have for this program over a first season, How do you know, how is the community going to know if this program is appropriately successful? If the TVL doesn't double in the first 3 months, does that count as a success? What's the pathway for the token assembly and delegates to understand the performance of the program?
Yeah, I'm happy to dive into that and take it. So there's TVL is one KPI. We all here know the problems of TVL, and so we're not just looking at that one thing. Although a lot of that would be a major focus. There's other things like price execution, where the market is today, liquidity depth, that we're also exploring. But there's a whole slew of other experiments and tests we're looking into. I would say in terms of like we are going to be creating bi-weekly reports and public dashboards, and so everybody can look at those and see whether the program is working. Those are going to be around supply side incentives, demand side dynamics, user behavior segmentation. Are we getting mercenary users? Are we getting civils? We've done a lot of civil analysis for a number of our past clients on some of the biggest airdrops in this year, and we'll be applying all of those models, and you guys will see whether the types of users we're acquiring, the types of supply we're acquiring, the type of demand that we're acquiring, and we can judge for ourselves and not just look at one number. So hopefully that gives you some explanation of how, and these will be shown in public dashboards. We're doing bi-weekly reports, and the whole point of our job and this investment into OBL for this is so that there is clear accountability, transparency, and data is flowing to everyone about how this program is going.
We're going to table this. Just a note for the team that I think it would be very helpful to get additional detail on specifically what's included in the biweekly reports and the seasonal reports and what the objectives, like what performance actually is. I know we can't get it in complete like details right now since the program hasn't actually started and the data hasn't gone through, but I think that would be really useful based on the questions that I'm seeing in the chat. Christoph, do you have a clarifying question that you'd like to address?
Regarding those reports, because like as in the scope of the STIP reporting that I linked in the chat above, there was also mention of weekly to bi-weekly reports, and as we both know, it didn't work out that well in that program. So I would like to understand, like, if this, like, how do we know as delegates that we should be calling out, like, calling out to for changes in the program? So I would like somewhere in the proposal to clearly state what exactly is it that you are committing to do, and how are we going to be able to check it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just so that we understand kind of why that's happened for the STIP program. STIP is 80 protocols, many of which gave data. So in order to build these reports, you need data from and indexed from the protocols. And those protocols there's 80 protocols, and many of them gave data, and the data we found was incorrect. This is the wrong number, you didn't calculate TVL correctly, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to start to show that number publicly. Instead, we're going to have to work with the protocols, QA their 80 contracts. That's a lot of the labor cost that goes into this. And so that's kind of where what slows down the reporting. And so the report that in this case is very different. We're working ahead of time. We understand, we have some idea of the types of programs protocols are coming in. There's also much fewer of them. And so we can do a lot more depth and handholding around making sure that is not a non-issue here. But hopefully you see the context of that.
And I'll add, like Christoph, I think, again, also appreciate the comment on the forum. Like one of the things that we will add in the replies and potentially also update the proposal is we'll make it very clear for the biweekly reports, like what exactly are the key metrics that we'll be providing like every 2 weeks, and also add a bit more color there on kind of like the ways that we think like what success looks like.
So moving into the final topic, I want to talk about who gets to participate in this program. There's been a variety of comments around which protocols. Have protocols already contacted? Have they been pre-selected? How is the eligibility set? And as part of this component, you have the flip side, which is what users are going to be encouraged to participate in this. Are the incentives only for whales, or is anyone participating in these protocols going to be going to have that level of accessibility? So maybe we can talk about the protocols as we already started talking about them. Can we give a brief overview of the eligibility, why this was chosen, and if protocols have already been selected, or where are we in terms of the protocol participation in an eligibility in the program?
I can do it. Basically, one of the criteria is, I think I don't want to give context here. When these programs go, you guys are seeing the budgets. When we do these programs, certain protocols could get $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, $15 million of incentives. Those contracts, those teams, they need to be very good in order for us to, ZK Sync, to be investing so much into those. And because when we start to do this work, you're looking at objective methodologies. You don't want to be subjective during the program. You want to look at this numbers as much as you can. And so the protocols that come in, some of them are going to win from there, and we're going to be investing quite a bit of money into that. So it's really important when we can be objective going forward. We need to have the right folks that have invested into their protocol so that we can also double down and invest even more. So these are just some of the ways that our selection criteria here is some indication of like they've invested enough that we can do so as well. And for that, one metric we've used is like, let's say 1 million in TVL. The other thing is that they need a KYC. Obviously, like it's not the most perfect metric, but this is one of the ways. But we need some indication that the protocol is stable enough, strong enough team to take on this kind of investment and be a pillar in the DeFi ecosystem.
Karthik?
Yeah, just to add maybe a quick amendment, because I know this has been kind of moving this week. We haven't made an amendment. We did remove the requirement for KYC, just by the way, just to be super clear on. That's all good. All this stuff has kind of been moving pretty quickly. And again, the reason for this, I want to be super clear on this. Like, this is in very stark contrast to something like STIP. We are not distributing rewards to protocols. We're distributing rewards to users. OpenBlock Labs will be looking at the various assets and pools and apps, and we want this to be meritocratic and data-driven. So if there's an application that has applied to the program, gone in, I'll get in a second of what that looks like, and they're crushing it, and their ROI for dollar spend incentive is like some number that's way up here compared to everybody else. Like, they should deserve to be doubled down on and make sure that growth is like sustainable. Like, that's the incentives that's the way that the incentives should be modeled, not that every protocol gets some fixed amount and then you kind of hope that they figure it out as they go. To answer Rafa's question, no teams have been pre-selected. We have an open admissions process. The admissions form is now live. There have been some teams that have applied, but no teams have been selected. OpenBlock Labs will review the admissions, assuming the proposal passes. OpenBlock Labs will review the applications and then recommend, based on the applications, the applicants that they believe will construe for the best first season, and then the committee can decide to approve or reject those. One other quick note: we have received some great feedback from Christoph, from from the forum post as well as this morning about potentially making the admissions more rolling. We are considering potentially modifying that. So we will post an update on on the forum about this, hopefully later today or by latest tomorrow morning.
And because the protocols are not receiving the rewards themselves, does that mean that the protocols don't have any influence or control over how the incentives are distributed?
That's correct. So the idea is that they, as part of the admissions process, the application, we do ask protocols for their input because they are experts in their space. We do ask protocols for their input on like, hey, what has been working well for you? Are there areas that you want to double down? Are there routes that you think could really be helpful for yourself and the ecosystem? So we do get their input, but the experiments and that are modeled like will come from OpenBlock Labs, and the actual protocol teams won't have direct input beyond their performance from prior cycles.
Great. So I think we've addressed all the questions so far. There are a couple of additional notes that I think that I think the community would benefit from clarification. One with regards to what the reporting content includes, risks of that reporting not being able to take place should there be issues such as Daljit mentioned, and also providing a clear path for community evaluation of the program's success. I think with that, if there's, I think we're okay to kind of close off. If you have any additional questions or comments, please add them to the chat in the next couple of minutes. If not, we'll complete this call and we'll post the recording of the conversation.
Yeah, while that happens, I wanted to, I know there's a lot of questions that streamed in, so I want to just maybe take a couple of them quickly, or like the team here could take a couple of them quickly just to make sure we're complete. There was a question about whether this is for like you, like for whales or for small people. Like this, we want to Baptiste's point, this program, the UX we're building, the idea is to make DeFi on ZK Sync era and kind of in spirit of the liquidity hub much more accessible to everybody. So this is the open participation for everybody to learn about DeFi, become a liquidity provider, and use the applications. And the kind of a key part of this is that we want to bring new users, new activity into the ecosystem. We also think this will be a net benefit as the program evolves. We want to also bring DeFi builders that are seeing the activity here that want to come here and build product. The other thing very quickly on retention, just wanted to cover that, and I mentioned this a little bit, but TVL, like focusing purely on supply side, like we know that retention and stickiness is very difficult to maintain because to the question's point, the next ecosystem that runs incentives, a lot of that capital is a bit more mercenary and will kind of potentially, like the risk of that capital moving elsewhere is fairly high. And so this is a core construct of the metrics that we'll be measuring every 2 weeks in the report, but it's really on the measuring what the demand side looks like across these kind of experiments and across these assets, and then having a measure on how much of this TVL do we think will be retained. And we should, there'll be ways that we can measure this because we can actually do a lot of control treatment experiments. We can say, actually, let's stop providing, this is hypothetically, but like, let's stop providing incentives for a particular, for a particular asset or particular pool and see what happens to both supply side and demand side. So we can do a lot of this iteration, which again is in is in contrast with some of the programs like STIP, where teams were never incentivized to actually think about retention. They're just like, we have this money, let's just make sure we're continuing to distribute this and kind of continuing to keep the number go up. Because of the design of this program, we have the agility and the ability to test these DCs out very thoroughly and make sure that we have one eye on growth, but one eye on sustainability.
Great. One question with regards to retention, how does this program contribute, I guess, to the wider kind of like ZK Sync ecosystem like evolution? So this being very focused on like the liquidity hub, what comes after? I think a lot of concerns around other programs is kind of this inability to bridge beyond kind of this bootstrapping phase into long-term building. I guess a question for Daljit first. What learnings have you had from previous programs to, as people have mentioned before, to avoid the sudden cliff problem post incentive programs? And from Karthik, as head of ERA, how do you see the evolution of this program kind of contributing to the long-term success of ZK Sync ERA and the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, to be honest, like we work with really nascent ecosystems that have where we've created a lot of success, and it's created a ton of attention about the DeFi ecosystems. Builders that wouldn't even have thought about building started to build, and it's created this positive flywheel. In fact, like a lot of, even on the investor side, a lot of teams and ecosystems are priced on a multiple of TVL for investors. And so what we've seen is, in fact, this really nice positive flywheel where it's like self-reinforcing loop, where it's like we bring DeFi TVL up, that increases the FDVs of these ecosystems, which then boosts the value of those. That DeFi TVL is mostly in the native token, and so that increases the DeFi TVL, and then that increases the FDV, and there's this like positive flywheel that's coming. It's almost obviously these are like the best cases, but that's what we've experienced, and that's what we were trying to build here, is like the legitimacy that this is a DeFi chain for DeFi builders, and then even the investor cohort, I think, starts to take notice, and that gives us this extra tailwind that's really beneficial in the program.
Yeah, and then I know we're coming up on time, but I can quickly discuss on kind of what's next. Like to Daljit's point, like from a ZK Sync ERA perspective, like we view this program as really trying to rev and kickstart this flywheel. We know that this program is not the end all be all, and like this is like some panacea that this program will solve like DeFi across the Elastic chain forever. It's really like a kickstart for the flywheel to bring liquidity, help bring builders, help bring users, and kind of rev this flywheel, and to Daljit's point, also like increase FDV and kind of value in the ecosystem. For what's next, like I think there's kind of two big constructs that we think about for ERA. One is the purpose of the liquidity hub is to be in service of other ZK chains. So we are using this program to begin to like we will do a lot of experimentation and testing to understand what are the core and critical functions that some of these other ZK chains need. Like we know, for example, TreasureDAO is spinning up their own chain. They want to really rely on a ZK Sync ERA for their liquidity. They don't really want to think about DeFi. They want to build amazing games. But we will know some of the specifics about what core functions do they need. Do they need just high liquidity for their native token? Do they need lending functions? We can better understand what they need, and to some degree, this will be an exercise in kind of helping us find a product market fit for the liquidity hub as these ZK chains launch. The other kind of core construct that we think about what's next is we believe there's a huge opportunity to take shots on goal on like strategic assets that we think can potentially have massive demand. Some of these kind of more nascent RWAs and others. And so one of the really interesting things that we'll do in this program is begin testing the demand for these assets through kind of these experiments, and begin kind of taking these shots such that we can really differentiate the types of assets and the types of DeFi opportunities that are on Elastic Chain compared to other ecosystems.
Thank you so much. We're over time. Thank you, everyone. If you did not get your question answered, please post on the forum. I know that the team is working really hard to make sure that all questions are answered. There's one left off question that I'll let people to answer offline. One again about report content, and another question for Open Lab regarding existing commitments, which relates to other questions regarding conflict of interest. So I'll encourage the team to please post an answer to those questions on the forum, and thank you everyone else for attending.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the time and questions.
Thank you.